Forget ROI. What about R.O.T?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, ignition, liftoff.
Hey everybody, it is Mark Dolfini, the Landlord Coach, and welcome to the Landlord Coach Daily-ish show. It's so good to be here. It has been an awesome day. The weather has been absolutely phenomenal here in the Midwest. I'm sure this is the calm before the storm, which means there's probably going to be locusts and ice storm in some time afoot. So who knows? I'm just going to enjoy it while as long as we possibly can. So welcome to the Landlord Coach Daily-ish show. Again, my name is Mark Dolfini, your host. Forget about ROI. What about R.O.T? Well, first of all, let's talk about what ROI is. ROI, for those of you who are not in, maybe you're new to investing, it's return on investment. So there's a ton of different metrics out there that are easy to get wrapped up in, and there's all sorts of debates that go on in terms of which is best to pay attention to. Should you watch cash on cash return? Should you watch capitalization rate? On and on and on. I mean, there's many ways as you can divide, multiply, and make big numbers out of little numbers and back to big numbers and other little numbers, all sorts of math that you can do. There are different metrics that you can track. So I'm not saying that anyone is particularly better than another, because that's not really the topic of what I'm talking about. First of all, what's a cash on cash return, right? The cash on cash return, for those of you who aren't aware, it's the amount of cash that you get back based on the amount of cash that you put out. So if you were to say buy a property for all cash for $100,000 and you were to get $10,000 back as a return, that's a 10% return. Okay, the math is not complex. Other people look strictly and solely at capitalization rate, and cap rate is for years it was kind of harbored strictly in the commercial realm, but it definitely has made itself into the residential side among the more sophisticated investors, and even now just more common investors, us common folk. The capitalization rate is simply the net operating income divided by the purchase price. Okay, so not going to make it a tutorial on that. We're just going to call, you can do cap rate, you can do cash on cash return, and about 5 other zillion other types of things that you can calculate. But that's not really what we're talking about today. Instead of ROI, I'm going to talk about R.O.T. So what's R.O.T? Well, R.O.T is your return on time. All right, coach, I know where you're going with this. I don't want to hear about return on time. I'm okay to work 90 or 100 hours a week if it means that I can get to, I don't mind flexing my hustle muscle. If it means I'm going to get to leave my job, I don't care what I have to do. I hear you. Just hear me out, because I was the one beating that drum the loudest back when I was probably 27, 28 years old. And I was like, whatever I have to do to get out there, to hustle, to make it my own, it's all on me. So I don't have to rely on some unreasonable boss. I don't care what I have to do. I'm willing to put in the work. I'm willing to make that happen. And I did. I was able to get that done through a lot of hard work and hustle. No question about that. But what I didn't recognize, and for those of you who know my story, you know that all I ended up doing was creating a more miserable job for myself, a job that I could not unwind from. And I don't mean like go home and put my feet up, which that was the case too, but I could not extract myself from, because I had created a bunch of little jobs for myself. Now, this is the case for those of you who are wholesalers. Now, if you're not familiar with what a wholesaler is, it's somebody who goes and buys a property at a very low price from someone who's maybe in distress or whatever it is, and gets that property under contract. And they can do it one of two ways. They either buy the property and then basically do nothing to it. They might do like a prehab to it. I'm using the word prehab, right? PREHAB, where they might do a trash out get a dumpster, do a trash out, and then they sell it to an investor who will do a full rehab on it, right? So they actually take title to the property, or they are strictly a wholesale where they get the property under contract. They really don't hold title to the property. They only hold the contract, and then they basically sell that contract to someone else, right? The right to buy it, and they get a fee on either side. Okay. So either way, it works. And some people who buy these properties do really, really well in terms of the amount of returns that they make. I mean, one guy I knew down in Texas, down in the Dallas area, I mean, he was probably turning 50, 60 grand a month doing wholesaling. Not a bad gig, right? I would question now, again, my criticism of that, and I don't say it's a criticism, but that to me sounds like a job. I have to continually go out and hunt for deals. That's not a job that I'm willing to commit to. That's not something that I want to do. So I'm also sitting here thinking like, okay, so you could make 50 grand, right? Doing that, 50 grand a month. What does that cost you in terms of your time? What's your return on time? And some of these guys, they have it down to a science where they may go, they've got all of this, their marketing pretty much automated, where they send out all these automated letters. The people that call back are kind of vetted by their team, and then they look at only the ones that are basically boiled down to the select few, and then they make offers, and then they get properties out of the pretty much maybe the top 1%, right? So they send out, say, 10,000 letters, and they may get 10 deals out of it. I don't know what the flow through on something like that is, but that's not probably unusual. I'm spitballing here because I'm not in that business. So, and again, in return on time, and return on their time may be actually quite low because they've built up the automation in the business, and the stuff that they're actually good at, the stuff that they want to do, which is doing deals, is actually quite low. So they, if they're truly netting 50 grand for a few hours worth of work, actual work during the week, hey, I think that's fantastic. Let's look on the other hand where you've got where I was when I bought a bunch of rentals, where, because I was not careful about lining out the individual line items with all the jobs that I created for myself. I created a mowing job for myself because I didn't budget for mowing. I created a cleaning job for myself because I didn't budget for the cleaning of all the houses, when they became vacant. I created a painting job for myself because I didn't budget for doing maintenance on the turns, right? All that stuff that I didn't budget for became a job that I created for myself. Go back to the wholesaling example for just a second. If, it takes a while to build up to that 50 grand a month. I mean, it took him a while, but I would say he's the anomaly, because there's a lot of wholesalers that are out there doing that hustle, working a lot of hours and not getting much juice from the squeeze. So let's say they get a wholesale deal, a couple of them once or twice a month, where they might net $3,000, $4,000, or $5,000. Granted, it's all on them, and good for them for going out and doing it. But honestly, would they have more time freedom? Would they have more flexibility in their calendar if they had a job that maybe paid them $20 an hour? Now, I'm not saying maybe they're not worth $20 an hour to an employer. So maybe that's the best thing that they can do for themselves right now. But your return on time is a very real metric, and it's one you really, really need to track. If you'd like to check out, again, going back to the rentals thing, about avoiding the most critical mistakes that I made and how to fix them and how to avoid them, just go to the download at landlordcoach.com/5 mistakes. You can see it there on the ticker. But here's the reality. You have to, number one, you have to know your numbers. You have to know your numbers. You have to know what you're tracking. And I'm talking specifically like, well, how many hours a week do you work? Do you work 40 hours a week? Well, do you count drive time? I would. Do you count the time what about school teachers? How many of you school teachers out there are doing work after hours? I know a lot of you do. And you don't get paid for that. That's not what you're getting paid. I mean, it's part of the job. Every teacher knows that. But that's part of the job. That's part of what you do, right? You don't grumble about that. You have to go home and take stacks of papers home with you so you can grade test scores and all this other stuff. That's part of it. right? So not only do you need to know your numbers, you need to, once you know your numbers, you have to be honest with yourself. I had a coaching student today, and that student was not really honest about how much time they're actually spending doing various things, doing various tasks. And I would say, really, so that thing only takes you a couple of hours. And it's, and I pointed out about drive time and all this other stuff and all these other metrics. And it's like, well, yeah, it's probably more. So when you amortize the amount of money that they made and divide it by the actual amount of time that they're spending doing that thing, it's really not as much as they were thinking. And it's easy to trick yourself to say, no, I'm making, $200 an hour. But when you look at the actual numbers for the amount of time spent, for travel time and preparation and all this other stuff that you need to do, and going and buying materials and going buying supplies, it's not nearly as much as they were thinking. So know your numbers, number one. And number two, you got to be honest. You have to be honest with yourself about those numbers and those metrics, specifically what you're going to track. But most importantly, God, I can't talk tonight. But most importantly, you have to value your time. What is your R.O.T? All right. That's all I have for tonight, everybody. Go ahead. You can click over to the download at landlordcoach.com/5 mistakes. And again, my name is Mark Dolfini, and I ask you always to please place a value on your free time, because if you don't, someone else will. But most important, there is no amount of money that will make time irrelevant. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.